Olá, pessoal, boa noite. Eu sou Cine da Immi Canada e hoje eu apresento para vocês o Shervin, que é o outro consultor que trabalha aqui comigo. É uma pessoa super de confiança, tem me ajudado aqui muito, né, com nossos clientes que estão chegando. E por ser um ex-oficial do CBSA, que é o oficial da fronteira, eu acho que é bem interessante a gente ter também uma noção do que um oficial, na verdade, CBSA poderia fazer com vocês na sua entrada aqui, tá? Alguns pontos, né, que nós vamos tocar hoje, né? Quais são os poderes de um oficial, o que realmente eles podem fazer, o que eles não podem fazer, o que seria uma inspeção primária e uma inspeção secundária, que muita gente, às vezes, passa pela inspeção secundária, o que esperar, tá? Quais são os documentos que vocês devem trazer quando vocês entram no Canadá? Quais são as consequências quando você é pego mentindo para o oficial de imigração e também a diferença entre alguns pedidos como de deportação, né, Exclusion Order e algumas outras coisas que seria interessante vocês saberem, tá? O Shervin, infelizmente, ele só fala inglês, então eu já pedi para ele falar bem devagar para que a gente consiga ter, né, uma compreensão maior da parte das dicas que ele vai estar passando. O que não ficar claro amanhã alguém da nossa equipe vai estar respondendo todas as perguntas no YouTube, também no nosso site, e dali a gente pode também fazer translation, tá? Do que não ficar claro para vocês. Ok, vou deixar o Shervin falar um pouquinho. Okay, Shervin, your turn.
Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. So,
speak slowly.
Okay, sorry. So we're gonna start off with just a basic overview what usually happens when people arrive at the border and what to expect and what the powers of the officers are. Obviously, there is a lot of miscommunication about what the officers can or cannot do. Usually, the CBSA officers here in Canada, they have a dual role, whether it's at the airport or whether it's at the land border. They act on two different primary acts, which are under the Immigration Act, and they also enforce the Customs Act of the Canadian government. Those are two separate things. Most of you that will be coming to Canada are probably more concerned about the Immigration Act. Under the Immigration Act, the officers have quite broad powers. They have powers of arrest. They have powers of letting people in or denying people entry, or basically even banning you from Canada. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that also they might have broad powers. This is a democratic country, and at many times, if anybody gets arrested, you do have the right to contact a lawyer as well as your embassy. This is very important for foreign nationals, for people such as from Brazil. When you come, if there is something that you are getting detained at the border, they should allow you to contact a lawyer as well as the embassy that's basically here in Vancouver, in Canada. Now, typically under what do the border officers look for when you arrive in Canada? For many of you that will come as visitors.
Just sorry, I have to interrupt you. I think we're having problems with our video. For some reason, it shows us green and people are not seeing us.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I don't know. Well, I think we can continue because they can hear us at this point, but they're just not seeing us.
Okay. All right. So what should you expect when you arrive at the say for example at the airport here? You arrive here and you're coming here as a tourist. Obviously, the first thing you're going to be arriving at what is considered here in Canada as a primary inspection line. That is the officers that sit in the booth. There is usually a long lineup. So most of the time, they basically ask you some basic questions about your visit to Canada, the reasons why you come to Canada, how long you're going to be staying in Canada, and if you have any goods to declare. Now, in most cases, in order to make this procedure quite easy for yourself, you can have a lot of the documentation that's necessary already with you on hand. What do they look for? They look for that you are going to be eventually leaving Canada. So your return should be handy with you. B, your passport with your visa attached to it, if you have from a country that requires a visa. C, proof of funds. These are the things that are very significant in approving a visa and even allowing you. Because you have a visa issued from abroad at an embassy, that does not guarantee you entry into Canada. The final decision will be with the border officer who is going to allow you entry into the Canada. And if they do ask you about this documentation and you do not have the documentation, you can be denied entry and sent back to your home country on the next flight. So you want to make things easy, have your return ticket, have your financial proof that you're going to have a place to stay. Most people, that when you go on a vacation, you will know where you're going to be staying, or at least have an idea about where you're going to be. Know a little bit about the city that you're about to visit, about the country. A lot of times what I've found out with a lot of people who I used to refuse previously is zero lack of knowledge about where they were going. People would arrive at the border. We would ask them, where are you going? Well, I don't know. That's not a good answer. Well, where are you going to stay? Are you going to stay in the hotel? Are you staying in a
place?
At a friend's place? Are you staying in on the streets? And so when you do go, always think about it. Any person that goes on a vacation will have a place to stay and will have a return place. If you do come without those, they will suspect that you're going to be coming here to stay. Yes, you might be wanting to visit Canada temporary and extend yourself as a study permit, or you wanted to stay here as a visitor, or you want to become a permanent resident. However, if you do not have this necessary documentation at the border, you could be possibly denied entry. And then once that is, your visa gets canceled, and it will become impossible to kind of overcome those kind of things through the embassy. Because once they see a refusal, and it's kind of across the board. CBSA has the same access to the same information that the embassies has, and vice versa. So when the CBSA puts notes on your files, the embassy will be able to see those notes. So very important to have that. Now, what are the other things that you could potentially look for? When you arrive, usually, like I said, you come to a big lineup, and either the officer will stamp your passport and you'll be allowed to go forward into Canada, or you will be referred in for a secondary examination. There is two separate secondary examinations. There is one that could be possibly for immigration, because they think you will be violating Immigration Act, or B, there could be a secondary one that is based on your customs, based on the goods that you're bringing. But these two can also be combined, because sometimes when they look through your stuff, they're looking for possible documentation where you're staying, if there is anything that you're going to have on you that would possibly indicate that you're going to stay here in Canada for a long period of time. And anytime if there is a lie to a border officer, usually 95 to 99% of the time you will be refused entry if they catch you lying to them. Okay? Keep in mind, when you arrive at the border, at the airport, they have the right to look through your cell phones. They have the right to look through your emails. They have the right to look through your computers. Anything goes. So that is a border that has been established where the Canadian authorities can do to protect the country, and they will use that. And a lot of times, again, from my own experience, is what gets people in trouble is cell phone messages, email messages. A lot of people carry everything on their computers these days about where they're gonna work, where they're gonna stay. So if you have all of those and you're planning to come here illegally and stay illegally, erase everything before you arrive, okay? It will potentially get you in trouble. You have to be prepared to answer questions about what your plans are in Canada. Some people, very lucky, you might not get asked any questions. You might be allowed in forward, but you also have to be able to prepare for worst case scenarios. So that's as far as it comes for the primary, secondary documents that you should have basically on yourself. Now, There is times, a lot of times now that I work on the other side, we have many clients, what I see with is they don't present the proper paperwork, or they are confused about what paperwork they need to present. If you are a person who has been approved for a study, a work visa, an immigrant visa, you need to make sure that you present the documentation that was issued by the embassy to the Canadian authorities. We'll see this all the time where clients arrive here and they say, oh, we had a work visa or we had a study permit, but the visa, the study permit or the work permit is only good if it's issued at the embassy. So at the border, my apologies. So you need to have all the
Let me just tell them something, because I think something that they're really confused sometimes is what is a visa and what is a permit. Okay, so I'm going to do that in Portuguese, ok? Só para deixar bem claro, tá? Quando você manda a sua aplicação para o consulado, por exemplo, que para quem está no Brasil, para São Paulo, você vai receber aquela etiquetinha colada no seu passaporte. Aquilo ali é o seu visa, tá? Quando você chegar aqui no Canadá, que você passa, então, pelo oficial, e se você vier estudar ou vier trabalhar, vai ser emitido uma permissão da sua estadia, que é o permit. Uma coisa não tem nada a ver com a outra, tá? O visto te dá direito de entrar no Canadá, tá? É de reentrada, caso você saia e você reentre. E a permissão é a sua permissão de estadia aqui dentro, ok?
Okay. So, now, those are like, this is very important, because once you arrive in Canada and you don't have the documentation, you will have to go back to the border, and you will not necessarily get the warmest reception. At the airport, because they're used to a lot to international travelers, you get a better reception. But when you go here and you try to get the work permit or the study permit at the border, it could be a little bit more challenging. We have had some clients who had different various experiences with the border officers.
But you know what? You guys are known to be not nice.
That's their job. They're in their mind, they're protecting the country, and whether they're nice or not, that you don't get the necessary training to be customer oriented. Now, we have had a lot of questions about what are the consequences if you lie to a border officer, and this is very important. Usually, if you are caught in a lie, they are trained. We were trained very well about how to detect lies. I worked with CBSA myself for 5 years. For me, I always tell Selena as well, it took me about a matter of about 2 to 3 minutes to figure out who was lying about what they were doing in Canada or what they were not doing in Canada. You become so accustomed, and when you start asking people questions about what they have been doing, people usually try to dig themselves in bigger holes than it is. We have a good example. I asked a client, what have you been doing? She said, well, I went to Calgary. So I asked her about some landmarks in Calgary, and she had zero idea. So if you are going to lie, prepare very well. Okay, my suggestion is never to lie. Okay, most of you will come. You are coming as tourists, you're coming as visitors, you're coming as students, or you're coming as workers. Your visas have been pre-approved a lot of times by the embassy. As long as you have the necessary paperwork that we discussed originally, you should not be facing a lot of problems at the border. Once you're in Canada, is a different story. There is different rules that apply once you are within Canada. Things will change a little bit, but your goal is to gain entry into the country. We can switch you from a visitor to a student. We can switch you from a visitor to a worker. There is always ways around it, and the Canadian government, because we are an immigrant country, has left a lot of doors open to do things. But again, the goal is never to lie. Okay, what does happen when do you lie? It all depends on what you're planning to come and do. Sometimes, if it's a simple, very straightforward lie about where you didn't know what you were doing here, depending on the officer, they do have a lot of discretion. they could allow you forward. The easiest thing that most officers will choose to do is a document that's called an allowed to leave. If you're having a situation, that is your best choice possibly to sign that, because that's a volunteer departure. You're basically telling immigration, I am going back home on my own will. Nobody forced me to leave Canada. Okay, so
will that be on the record later on? That
will be on the record, but again, depending on the severity of the lie and depending on the scenario, it might be your best option to say, for example, if they have caught you in a lie to come and work here in Canada, they have the option to issue an exclusion order, which is something that won't allow you to come back to Canada for 1 year. But if you give you the option to go for an allowed to leave, that is the easiest thing for you to do, because you're telling the government, yes, you caught me, but I'm doing
I'm gonna leave.
I am gonna leave on my own accord. I want to get on the next plane. I'm not even seeking entry. But if they have to do the necessary paperwork, and if they do have the powers to ban you for 1 year, they do have the powers to issue deportation orders, which will ban you for life. Okay, deportation orders are quite complex, so we're not even going to go into them. Most of the things that you're going to see, either allowed to leave, which is a volunteer, or the one that very common is the exclusion order, which bans you from Canada for 1 year. Those are issued in cases of where you are caught if you are coming here to work here illegally. That can be done, and you don't have the necessary paperwork. Hiding information from immigration in previous matters where the visa was issued, and a lot of the times the border officers, how it works, the environment there is, it's very much, they have a lot of pressure not to have lineups as well. So they are under constant pressure to make sure that people don't wait for a long time in the lineups. Many of them will go with the assumption that if the visa was issued in Brazil, that all the documentation have been verified. So, and the information was verified. So not a lot of people will come ask you whether you have lived illegally in other places, because it will not even matter at this point of time. Yes, you did. Say, for example, we have people who live, many of them have lived illegally in the United States. Does it matter at this point of time? This is not the United States. This is Canada. Even if you were in Canada illegally, yes, they might say, well, he might be a risk factor, but as long as you have all the documentation to prove that you're leaving Canada again at the end of your stay, it might not even be the worst case scenario. Okay, again, it's very seldom that people, the officers, will ask you those questions, whether you have lived illegally anywhere or whether you have lived. Even if you have, if you hadn't declared it to the embassy, you know, stick to your story. If you had declared it to the embassy and you had, and they have issued you the visa, by all means, voluntarily declare it. There is nothing, you know, that can go against you at this point in time, because this is not the country where you were illegally. Okay.
But being, you know, an ex-officer, right? If people came in the border and they, well, for some reason you think that they were living illegally in the States for a while and they haven't declared that, would you still allow them to come in?
Depending on the scenario.
Okay, so they're coming as a visitor.
Yes, I will tell you. If they were coming as a visitor and it was immediately prior to them being illegal, if they were illegally 4 or 5 years ago, we would allow 95% of the time we would allow them entry. If it was something that was, like, say, in the last month or 2 months, probably not. Okay? You wouldn't allow them entry, because that is fairly recent and they would be considered higher risk. Again, you can still cover yourself by having the necessary documents. I have allowed a lot, you know, people who were, as long as they had the return tickets with them, non-refundable return tickets, a place to stay, enough money. If You had
How much money is enough for someone that wants to stay a month in Canada, for example?
For a month, the typical rule of thumb is about, they say anywhere between $50 to $100 per day, excluding your living expenses, okay? So you calculate that, you know, because they say for lunch, dinner, and stuff, so anywhere between $50 to $100 per day. So 100 times 30, you're looking at about $3,000.
Per month. That's how much you want to see if people wants to come in to stay.
Exactly. That's excluding living expenses.
Okay, plus hotel or family. Okay.
Exactly. If you have prepaid for your hotel, and the funds could have been also in the form of your Visa card, your credit card. It doesn't necessarily always have to be cash. Okay.
I think I'm going to explain a little bit in Portuguese because you have, you know, gone far about that. Ok, só um pouquinho, um resumo do que ele falou, tá? Eu acho que ele falou um pouco das consequências, né, quando você pega mentindo para a imigração, tá? Então, assim, é um caso complicado, porque no partir do momento que você entra aqui no Canadá, todo o registro que passou pelo consulado, ele tá no sistema. Eu acho que é muito mais da preguiça ou não do oficial naquele momento de entrar na sua história. Se você tá dando motivo para ele desconfiar de você, provavelmente ele vai entrar para perguntar mais detalhes, ok? Então, tudo que você falou para o consulado, ele vai estar no seu sistema, vai estar no seu file, tá? Então, assim, quando você pega uma situação, né, onde o oficial acaba descobrindo que você mentiu para eles, né, você omitiu um fato, muitas vezes a melhor maneira é simplesmente dizer que você quer withdraw, que você está voluntariamente pedindo para não entrar mais no país, tá? Essa informação fica retido, porém é a melhor opção naquele momento. Senão, o que pode acontecer? Eles podem acabar fazendo um Exclusion Order, né, te dando essa ordem, né, de exclusão, que você fica proibido de entrar no Canadá de 1 a 2 anos, geralmente 1 ano, mas podendo chegar a 2. Né? Ele, como oficial de imigração, né, o que ele procura na sua entrada? Saber se você tem toda a documentação certa, se você está falando que você vem visitar, que você saiba onde você vai ficar, um pouco sobre a cidade, né? Por exemplo, vão te perguntar onde você vai visitar, que você tem ideia de onde você vai visitar mesmo, né? A parte financeira, né? O que eles procuram olhar? Se você vai ficar um mês aqui, eles calculam que você vai ter um gasto de $100 mais ou menos por dia, então vezes 30 são $3.000 para um mês de viagem aqui, sem contar com moradia, então sem contar com hotel, se você vai ficar na casa de alguém, uma carta dessa pessoa confirmando que está te convidando a ficar, tá? Então, esses são pontos importantes. Perguntas que a gente tem recebido muito também são pessoas que ficaram sem status nos Estados Unidos, tá? Geralmente, tá? Com a minha experiência, né? Quando existe essa possibilidade, quando vocês ficaram nos Estados Unidos, tá? E vocês declararam isso ao dar entrada no seu processo como visitante ou estudante nos últimos 5 anos, dificilmente, tá? O consulado em São Paulo, ele concederia o seu visto, tá? Porém, pessoas que não mencionam sobre isso e conseguem, tá, o visto, ao chegar aqui no Canadá, nós já temos um problema porque acabou omitindo essa informação, e se o oficial descobrir, realmente uma decisão dele naquele momento de permitir que você entre ou não, tá? Ele falou, por exemplo, pessoas que ficaram 4, 5 anos nos Estados Unidos, tá? Voltaram ao país de origem, voltaram para o Brasil, por exemplo, ficaram um tempo e estão vindo para cá, dependendo das circunstâncias da estadia, da documentação que consiga provar para ele deixaria a entrada. Se você ficou ilegalmente nos Estados Unidos há pouco tempo atrás e você está tentando vir para cá, né, numa estadia temporária, dificilmente ele aprovaria, tá? Então, essas foram as questões levantadas. I think I'm going to ask one of the questions, okay? Eu vou aqui ler a pergunta do Rodrigo e depois eu vou traduzir ele em português antes que ele responda. And then I'm going to say it in Portuguese, okay? So, hello, Selena. Please ask the ex-officer of CBSA what can happen if a person omitted the info that he overstayed in the U.S. at the time that he applied for the Canadian tourist visa. The visa was granted, by the way, but the person is afraid to be sent. I have to find the rest of the question now. I think, okay, here. To be sent back home when he arrives at immigration in Canada. If the officer inquires about it, what does he need to say or do? Então, nesse caso, a pergunta do Rodrigo, tá? Assumindo que uma pessoa ficou ilegalmente nos Estados Unidos, omitiu esse fato quando deu entrada no visto como turista, foi aprovado o visto dele, porém está preocupado em ser mandado de volta, né, para o Brasil ao chegar aqui no Canadá, né? Então, o que ele deve dizer ao oficial caso seja questionado?
So, One of the things you have to ask is that why would they start asking whether you were illegal in a different country? Okay, is there any indication in your passport, like if there is stamps that would kind of, so they do sometimes look at the stamps that are in the passport to see where you have been, you know, and if they ask if you have been in the States, and if you have already kind of not declared the fact, if you try to be here now and try to kind of rectify the situation at this time, it might not work very well, because they are going to consider that as a misrepresentation, and they could possibly revoke the visa. Okay, so if you have already kind of lied about this, unless there is physical evidence that could prove that you were illegally in the United States, then stick to your story. Now, they don't, the immigration officers, what do they have access to? What do they, a lot of people wonder what they see on their screens. What they see is when they scan your passport, mainly they see if you have had previous infractions with Immigration Canada or with Customs Canada. That's the only thing that they can see on their screen. If you are sent in for secondary, the additional thing that they could possibly see is if you had any criminal infractions in the United States. Beyond these two countries, they would have to do a lot of investigation to find out whether you had criminal history or any infractions in other countries. And in many, many cases, that falls outside the scope of their duties. So unless you're on Interpol and your name flashes right away as soon as your passport is scanned, it's very unlikely, or there are very clear indications such as ripped passport pages, missing pages in your passport. There is very unlikely that many of the officers will dig into whether you were illegal in other places.
What if you come in with a brand new passport?
That is fine.
So that's no indication whatsoever that you were stamped in the U.S.
No, and you don't have to even, like I said, at that point in time, it's just, you don't even have to declare. They usually ask you about the documents, about what the purpose of your stay is here in Canada.
Because that's all that matters to them, right?
Exactly.
Okay, now, I had a case where a client, she applied for a work permit. She was here as a visitor, so she went to the border to get her actual work permit. And she stayed in the States for about 20 years or more than that. She never declared that information, and we didn't know until that very same day after we were driving back from the border, actually. And the officer asked her if she was ever in the States, and she kept saying no. But you know what, from what I could feel, the officer knew that she had been to the States for quite a bit.
Well, there is a possibility that the states at times, depending on what, the United States has different laws. They can't tip off the Canadian authorities very easily about certain things.
And going to the border, like crossing border by land,
yes,
right? Are the chances higher for them to know that someone was illegal in the States?
No, they have this access, the same system across the board. So unless, like I said, there was something, I couldn't really tell you what the reason why there were. I have had happen that a couple of times, but I tell you, it was mainly with Mexican clients. And was this person Mexican or Brazilian?
No, Brazilian.
Brazilian. With Mexicans, the Canadians kind of know, depending on the scenario, that many of them at one point in time could have possibly lived in the United States illegally. Nevertheless, even if she was illegal in the United States for 20 years, even if she admitted to it, nothing, what can the officer possibly do at this point in time? You're applying to enter Canada, not the United States. You have the documentation necessary to apply for a work permit in Canada. Does it matter that you were illegally in the States? The officer might kind of say, yes, I'm not happy that you are unauthorized, like you might not leave at the end of the authorized stay. However, the decision at that time, it becomes really dependent on what paperwork you also provide. It's very common to leave, people who have lived illegally in the United States to be allowed into Canada.
Okay.
Even for refugee cases. So it doesn't really, it's two separate countries, and both countries pride themselves in different immigration systems. So yes, it might, you know, alter the decision of the officer, but many of them, keep in mind, if there is a tip, that's a whole different story. The United States, under the law, they can tip the Canadian authorities about what happens. So if there is somebody illegal there, they can tip the Canadian authorities, but it doesn't go the other way around. The Canadian Privacy Act is quite strict about what Canadian authorities can share with the US authorities.
Ok, eu vou traduzir essa parte que ele falou, tá? Em relação às informações entre os Estados Unidos e o Canadá, tá? O mesmo sistema que usa no aeroporto é usado pelas fronteiras terrestres, tá? Então, o que vê no sistema, você vê no outro, né? O que eu tava dizendo para ele, né? Eu tive uma cliente que ela ficou muitos anos nos Estados Unidos, na verdade, ela nunca mencionou isso nem a mim, e ela estava aqui como visitante, a gente conseguiu, né, fazer o visto de trabalho dela, e eu levei ela na fronteira para buscar a permissão dela. Se ela tivesse me falado a verdade, na verdade, eu não teria jamais ter feito dessa forma e ter levado ela até a fronteira. E ela foi muito questionada na fronteira pelo oficial canadense se ela nunca havia ficado nos Estados Unidos. E até então eu estava defendendo ela porque eu não sabia que realmente ela tinha ficado. Ao voltarmos, né, para o escritório, e ela acabou comentando comigo que sim, eu fiquei durante quase 20 anos nos Estados Unidos, tá? Então, assim, o que entregou ao oficial a fazer essas perguntas para ela, a gente não sabe exatamente, porque o passaporte dela não tinha indicação que ela tinha ficado nos Estados Unidos nem nada, mas alguma coisa ali estava dizendo ao oficial. O que está dizendo tá? Muitas vezes o governo americano, ele dá esses tips, né? Ele dá essa dica para o governo do Canadá. Mas o governo do Canadá, ele tem uma policy bem strict em relação à privacidade das informações. Então, ele não compartilha essa informação com os americanos. Porém, tá? O americano coloca essas informações, talvez, para o canadense, ok? I think we have to go for the other questions that we have.
Sure.
Okay, let's go for that. Ok, a pergunta é do Adriano, né? Gostaria de saber como é a entrevista na imigração quando você vai para o Canadá com visto de residência permanente com a família. So, Adriano's question is, what kind of questions they will be asked when they come in as permanent resident at the border?
Okay, that's usually you will have a form that the embassy will give you, and it's called a confirmation of landing. A lot of the landing procedure is based on that. So basically the officer will verify the information that it matches to your passport, and as long as they're happy, the 2 or 3 additional questions you usually ask is about whether you have ever been convicted of any criminal offense, just to double check to make sure, so you initial that, and how much money you're carrying with you. So if you have, or how much money you will be transferring to Canada. So those are usually the 3 or 4 additional questions. And depending on how the conversation goes, they might ask you some additional question under what category you came, what your previous experience is. But landing procedures are very straightforward. The immigration officers, most of the time, they don't ask a lot of questions when it comes to that, because they feel that all the work has been done by the embassies. Now, one of the things that they do a lot of times wonder about is the personal goods that you're going to be importing into Canada. A lot of people don't know that, but as a first-time Canadian, when you become a permanent resident, at the first time you enter Canada, you have the right to bring all your personal goods that you have owned in your home country. As long as they're not restricted, you're allowed to bring them into Canada. You can import them without paying any duties and taxes. So if you don't do that, anything that you will bring afterwards, you have to pay duties and taxes, possibly. So what I usually tell my clients is to make a list of all the goods that you wanted to import into Canada, whether it's with you or whether you want to do afterwards. So that becomes also part of the customs procedure. So the immigration officer will first do your landing, and then they will do your custom paperwork as well to allow you to bring those goods later on into the country. But when it comes for the landing processes, the main questions are going to be about previous criminality, possibly, and the amount of funds that you're going to bring into the country. And if there is restrictions or conditions on your landing papers, they will discuss that with you as well, such as medical inadmissibility or medical surveillance. They will discuss that with you.
Ok, só traduzindo um pouquinho o que ele falou, tá? Quando a pessoa chega como residente permanente aqui, na verdade, não deve ter muitas perguntas na hora, porque o oficial já assumiu que a embaixada fez todo o seu dever de casa antes de emitir o visto residente permanente, tá? Então, o que eles vão perguntar? Provavelmente, é uma confirmação que você não tem nada, não tem nenhuma pendência criminal, tá? Eles vão perguntar sobre o dinheiro que você está trazendo com você. Até 10 mil dólares, nós não precisamos declarar. Acima de 10 mil dólares, declara esse dinheiro, tá? Você não paga multa, você não paga imposto sobre ele, mas eles querem saber a procedência desse dinheiro. Então, é importante que você faça essa declaração, ok? E o que eles podem perguntar também o que você fazia, né, no seu país de origem. Algumas perguntas só para confirmar que realmente, né, a aplicação está toda em dia, tá? Uma outra dica que ele deu, que muitas pessoas não sabem, quando você vem, tá, mudar de vez permanentemente para o Canadá, você pode trazer, por exemplo, os móveis da sua casa, tá? Do Brasil ou do país que você tiver quando você se mudar para cá. Você não paga uma taxa ao governo do Canadá. Você tem o direito de trazer. E uma pergunta que os oficiais vão te perguntar o que você está trazendo contigo naquele momento e está vindo alguma coisa que não esteja acompanhando vocês naquele momento. Caso vocês estejam trazendo container, vocês precisam declarar isso naquele momento da sua entrada, ok? Ready for next question?
Yes.
Okay. Question from Felipe is, when I was in Vancouver in 2008, I ended up taking a fine of SkyTrain and not made the payment as it would go back to Brazil a day later. This can hinder me getting my visa and my permit? Pergunta do Felipe quando ele esteve no Canadá, né, em Vancouver, em 2008, ele acabou tomando uma multa, né, no metrô, e ele acabou não pagando, porque ele foi embora no dia seguinte para o Brasil. Ele está perguntando se isso seria algo que impediria dele conseguir o visto dele e a permissão de estadia.
Unless there has been, probably not at the embassy level, because they will not have access to some of this information. And what possibly could have happened is, I hardly doubt for a ticket on the SkyTrain that there is a warrant issued for your arrest, okay? In some provinces, if you don't pay like speeding tickets, they will issue a warrant for your arrest. In Vancouver, for tickets, you're probably not going to have a warrant, so it shouldn't really affect anything. Nevertheless, you could have been probably referred to some sort of collection agency here, or that there is something with the transit authority that's on your file, and if you get back in, you probably want to clarify that up. But as far as it comes for immigration purposes, it's not a criminal act, so it shouldn't hinder you coming back.
Ok, então, respondendo a sua pergunta, tá, Felipe? Ele acredita que você não vai ter problemas. Pela minha experiência, o ticket que você tomou aqui do metrô não te impede de ter a aprovação do seu visto. O que pode ter acontecido né, terem enviado, na verdade, né, a sua dívida para uma empresa de cobrança, tá? Então, seu nome não vou dizer seu nome pode estar sujo, porque não funciona dessa maneira aqui, porém, quando forem tirar o seu crédito, provavelmente podem ver que tem uma pendência aqui, ok? Mas é algo que é facilmente resolvível, então, assim que você chegar aqui, eu aconselho você a resolver essa pendência. Ok, próxima pergunta, tá? O que acontece com os turistas que passam pela imigração que não falam inglês? Qual a orientação? So the next question is, what about for people that come in as visitors and they do not speak English?
If you're at the airport or anywhere, for a matter of fact, Canada is quite multicultural. They usually do have officers that will either speak the variety of languages that will be able to assist. And if it is worst case scenario, immigration has authorized translators that they could contact. But again, it all depends on the scenario. Not every single case they're going to be calling for translators. In most of the cases, the officers, if they're satisfied that you're a visitor, they will stamp your passport and they will allow you forward into the country. It's only when there's going to start going further into questioning because they might be suspicious of something, only at that time they have to provide you either a translator or another office who can assist with the translation. One thing to keep in mind, when it comes to very intense immigration examinations, such as refugee cases, or where they are trying to exclude you from the country, basically not allowing you into the country for 1 year, in all those instances, there has to be certified translators. The other officers are not allowed to translate.
Ok, então assim, quando você chega como visitante, geralmente são pouquíssimas perguntas, eles entendem também que muita gente que vem visitar não necessariamente fala inglês, tá? Geralmente tem os oficiais que eles falam uma segunda, uma terceira língua que eles podem pedir, né? O oficial que estiver atendendo pode pedir esse auxílio, ou tem também os tradutores oficiais que vão poder fazer essa parte. O que ele estava focando era em caso de refúgio, tá? Quando a pessoa chega no Canadá e pede refúgio. Nesse caso, o outro oficial que fala a sua língua não pode traduzir. Tem que ser através de um tradutor juramentado. Juramentado não, desculpa. Tem que ser um tradutor realmente tenha licença para tradução, tá? Não pode ser um oficial, não pode ser nada que não seja legalizado, digamos assim. Pergunta da Marília, tá? Gostaria de saber como é a entrevista de imigração com o casal que está indo com visto de estudante. Em nosso caso, para college. Quais documentos são pedidos? Okay, in this case, Marília is asking, she's coming with her spouse to come in to study. One of them will study and the other will probably work. Mm-hmm. So what kind of documentation should they bring?
Okay, so how long are they staying here?
It's a college, so yeah.
Okay, so they want to know what
kind of documents.
Well, they're gonna have basically the pre-approval from the embassy. Mm-hmm. So that's gonna be one of the main things. The officers could possibly ask for proof of funds and possibly where they're gonna stay. So if they're gonna stay, they should have some sort of rental agreement or some sort of communication with the person. Usually, like I said, there might be some Craigslist advertisement,
homestay or anything like that.
Exactly. So there is always some communication with somebody about where you're gonna stay. So you can provide those as proof if needed.
Okay, in relation to proof of funds, okay, should they just bring their latest statement or should they bring the latest 3 months?
We should just the latest statements along with the cash that they have. So sometimes people carry cash. Keep in mind, if you are carrying cash of $10,000 Canadian and more, you will have to declare it. It's not illegal to bring in cash over than $10,000. That's not the case. As long as you declare it, all they do is fill out a form, you sign it, and you're on your way. But if you don't declare it, that's when you're going to run into problem. It is not illegal to bring $10,000 and more into the country. The only thing is illegal is to hide it. You have to declare it.
Outro ponto que eu já tinha, né, falado, que ele voltou a falar, é sobre a questão do dinheiro, tá? Não é ilegal você trazer mais do que $10 mil, mas o importante é que você declare, é muito simples, é só declarar, você assina, né, um formulário e acabou. O problema é quando você não declara, ele passa a ser dinheiro do governo do Canadá, eles podem reter esse dinheiro e você tem que pagar uma multa para tirar esse dinheiro. A pergunta da Marília, tá? Quando você já tem, né? Quando você vem fazer um college aqui, você já tem a pré-aprovação do consulado. Então, o que eles querem saber no momento da sua chegada é você trazer o seu passaporte, né? O documento com a aprovação, né? Que você recebeu do consulado. Provavelmente, eles vão querer ver que você tem também a parte financeira para ficar. Eu perguntei, do último mês, últimos 3 meses? Ele disse, bom, provavelmente só do último mês já seria suficiente. O endereço de onde vão ficar, né, e a carta de aceitação da escola. Esses seriam os pontos importantes para vocês trazerem aqui. I do have a question from YouTube. The clients are asking, what if they're coming with pets? What are the requirements to come in with pets?
Is it okay?
With dogs.
Yes.
Dogs.
Okay. Dogs, usually, as long as they have vaccination certificates, they should be okay. Other pets, depending on... There is certain pets you're allowed to bring, and there's certain pets you're not allowed to bring.
Is there a list?
There is a list, and the list is provided actually on the CBSA website. And for each pet, you can actually find out what you require. Now, I have seen actually lions brought into the country, like pet lions. So Depending on the scenario, as long as you have the certificates with you, you are allowed to import them into there. Sometimes they have to get they will come and get a veterinarian to look at them at the airport.
Depending on what type of pets are bringing.
But dogs are usually okay.
Ok. Então, respondendo a pergunta da Caroline que veio pelo YouTube, tá? Olá, pessoal, boa noite. Estamos indo para Vancouver em maio com 2 cachorrinhos. Quais as dicas para passar pela imigração com animais de estimação? A resposta dele foi, né? Geralmente, cães, né? São mais fáceis, né? Mais normais, digamos, porque ele já viu até filhotes de leão passar pela imigração. Existe uma lista, tá? No site do CBSA, onde fala para cada tipo de animal de estimação quais são os documentos que você deve trazer. Tragam com certeza a carteira de vacinação e ele traduzido, tá? Provavelmente esse vai ser um dos documentos mandatórios para apresentação. Ok, next question. Pergunta da Cláudia. Retornei em março de um intercâmbio de 1 mês no Canadá. Porém, recebi de uma amiga um convite para retornar em maio e ficar na sua casa, pois no período de intercâmbio não tive a oportunidade de conhecer quase nada. Qual a minha postura na imigração? So Claudia's question is, she was here in Canada for a short-term course about a month. She received an invitation from a friend to return to Canada as she didn't have much time to visit. So, what when she comes into Canada, what are the questions that she'll be asked?
I'm guessing she still has a valid visa. It is like anything else. Why are you coming back? Most likely, well, I'm here to visit my friend. If you have been issued a multiple entry visa, Canada has already put the trust in you that you are able to come back into the country. This time they might ask you a lot more questions, but be prepared. Tell your friend that this happens all the time, that the officer could call the friend and ask whether you're coming back. So tell your friend to know about your arrival and departure dates. Make sure you have proof of funds. Make sure you have a return ticket on you. And make sure you know the address of your friend, where she lives. Make sure you know where, because you have been here previously, at least if they do ask you some questions about the city that you were in, maybe you can explain it a little bit. And there should be no further issues with that.
Cláudia, então se ele acha que você não teria problemas, tá? Portanto, que você explique, né, que durante esse mês você estudou, você tem uma carta convite da sua amiga e a sua amiga realmente saiba que dia que você está chegando, que confirme que, né, que você vai ficar na casa e tudo mais. Você pode, simplesmente, assim, é muito explicável, tá? A situação onde você passou um mês aqui, você não teve tempo de conhecer e agora você está voltando para isso. Aí ele não vê muito porque a imigração não deixar você entrar aqui. Okay, so I have a question here. I'll be driving our car, and my husband will drive a medium-sized U-Haul truck. Will we have problems taking our things into Canada from the U.S., some furniture, and so on? I have a study visa, a student visa, and my husband a worker visa, and the kids visitor visa.
Make a list of all the goods you're importing. You should not have a problem with bringing the goods into Canada. The things that you do need to verify is your car insurance, because if it's based in the U.S., whether the U.S. car insurance will cover you if something will happen. And if that's the case, you probably need to have to do some paperwork regarding the car in order to maybe bring the car in temporary. But because you're not coming in permanently, as long as you have a list of goods, you should be okay. If you are bringing guns into the country, make sure they're registered. That's not even illegal as long as you have the proper licenses. There is a process that you have to go through here to get licensed in Canada, and then you can even import guns if need to be. But my suggestion, leave guns and anything that like maybe behind in the United States, because it will delay you by a significant amount of time at the border.
Ok, Débora. Então, assim, eu acho que você entendeu também a resposta dele, né? Em relação à sua pergunta de estarem trazendo mudança para o Canadá, se seria para não seria, portanto, que sejam bens, né? Que você declare que possam entrar aqui no Canadá. Se vocês estiverem trazendo armas, vocês precisam declarar isso. Ele sugere que você deixe as armas nos Estados Unidos, porque é um processo que vai, né, vai atrasar bastante a sua estadia na fronteira e, dependendo do que for, você tem que fazer uma documentação para isso, ok? Mas você não deve ter problemas em trazer. O que ele deixou avisar também em relação ao seguro do seu carro, tá? Se o seguro feito nos Estados Unidos vai permitir que você tenha cobertura estando no Canadá, isso pode ser um ponto que o oficial possa te questionar. Okay, good. Question here from Igor is, if he's coming for 2-year college, he does not need to show a return ticket, right?
No, you can't, okay? Those usually should be pre-approved by the embassy, and there should be sufficient amount of comments, and when they issue the study permit, then they will see that it is a 2-year. Obviously, if there is longer periods of time that you're planning to stay, you cannot pre-book those tickets. But you will need to show 1-year proof of funds for 1 year at least minimum.
Ok. Igor, então assim, para quem vai ficar 2 anos, você não teria nem como comprar uma passagem, quer dizer, às vezes tem quando não tem validade, né? Mas dificilmente você teria uma passagem que valeria por 2 anos. Então, o que é importante na sua entrada é provar que você tem pelo menos 1 ano, tá? Do valor para sua estadia aqui, tá? Então, não importaria muito em relação à sua passagem de volta. Ok. Pergunta do Diego, né? Hi, Selena. I received a scholarship for graduate studies that includes fee, tuition, and spending. It's about $1,300 per month. Showing the funding offer that the university sent me, it is signed by the university. Is it good enough for proof of funds?
That is. As long as you have the letter from the university, yes, that is acceptable.
Tá? Então, Diego, no seu caso, seria suficiente com a carta da faculdade provando que você vai receber esse valor de $1.300 durante a sua estadia aqui. Ok, let's go for... let me see the questions that we haven't answered yet. Ok, question here is... Boa noite. Eu e minha namorada pretendemos ir como turistas para Toronto, ficar na casa dos familiares dela que possuem dupla cidadania. Gostaria de saber que tipo de perguntas poderiam me ser feitas na entrada do país. So, Alexandre, he's coming with his girlfriend to visit some family members in Toronto where they have dual citizenship. So they're wondering what kind of questions they will be asked upon their entrance in Canada.
Well, the people that are coming?
Yes, the people that are coming to visit, the family, they have family in Toronto.
So it'll be the same question about where you're going to be staying, how long you're going to be staying. Do the people that you're visiting, do they know how long you're going to stay? So again, if they have quite high suspicions, they might contact the family members. But like I said, this is in there. So make sure that you have the family member's address. If they're picking you up, at least have a cell phone number from them, return ticket, and proof of funds.
Ok, então é praticamente as mesmas perguntas, né? De sempre, né? O que vocês vão fazer, quanto tempo vão ficar, onde vão ficar, quanto dinheiro tem, tá? Ok, Alexandre? Ok, a question from Ana Lúcia. Olá, Celina, boa noite. Gostaria de saber quais os motivos efetivos de uma negativa de extensão de visto, caso eu esteja finalizando o curso de inglês e aguardando a aceitação, a aplicação do college. Na verdade, isso é um processo feito dentro do Canadá, não seria na fronteira, tá? Então, eu vou estar respondendo essa pergunta a você. É assim, se você está fazendo inglês aqui, tá? Com visto de estudante já, você está apenas fazendo uma extensão da sua estadia aqui dentro, esperando o college, né? A aprovação para o college. Então, você está no Imply Status, seria, portanto, que você prove que você estudou, né, o curso de inglês, você tem a parte financeira, você não deve ter problemas. Agora, se for uma troca de status, vai depender do Visa Office no Brasil ou em Los Angeles, em olhar sua aplicação e ver realmente se eles acreditam que você vai embora no final da sua estadia ou não, se você tem a renda, né, necessária, e se faz sentido você querer fazer esse curso, na verdade, no Canadá, né? Porque você estando no Canadá por um tempo, você já perdeu um pouco dos seus laços com o Brasil. Então, essa é uma outra coisa que tem que ser levada em consideração. Ok, eu acho que respondemos, né, a maioria das perguntas que nós temos. Tá chegando também ao fim, né, do nosso tempo. Eu vou pedir para ele fazer, de repente, um resumo, né, das dicas mais importantes que ele gostaria de deixar para vocês. Amanhã, uma pessoa da nossa equipe vai estar respondendo o restante das perguntas e o que precisarem, né, partes que precisam ser traduzidas, coloca uma mensagem para a gente que nós vamos estar fazendo isso. So we're coming to an end. Do you want to give them any other tips that you haven't told them?
Well, like I said, the best tips that I could give anybody that is planning to visit, study, come here, when you're at the border, it's understandable. Even now up to this date, I used to work there. I still run into my old friends working at the border when I cross the border because I go to the United States. I still get nervous. It's natural to get nervous. Your best defenses are have your paperwork ready. Make sure the things we discussed about if you're coming as a visitor. Do not lie, because the more you lie, the harder it might be on you. So try to be as prepared as you can. Lies usually will end up causing you a lot more headache. 95% of the time, whether it's at the airport, whether it's the land border, you will get in without any problems as long as the visas have been approved. It's only 5% of the time where people might be questioned further. Inform yourself. The biggest thing is any place that you go to, when you go in, you should know a little bit about where you're going and what goods you are bringing. The other aspect of things as well is if you bring in goods into the country where they're not allowed because you didn't know that they will turn around and tell you, well, you should have educated yourself before you came in. Ignorance is not a possibility. So before packing your suitcase, make sure anything that you put in there you are allowed to bring them, because even if you get under customs, if you have infractions under customs, then they can turn around and send you back based on immigration because you're not a Canadian or a permanent resident. So all of a sudden, your immigration might have been perfect, but you have some goods in your suitcase that are not suitable to be brought into the country, and they're going to base that on that factor, saying that you did a cross-country cross-border offense, and they could possibly kick you back for that as well.
Ok, então ficaremos por aqui. Aguardaremos vocês então na próxima palestra online. Tenha uma boa noite. Tchau, tchau.